I'd like to call to order the May 26, 2022 Clive City Council meeting. Would the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards,
Here.
council members Klein,
Here.
McCoy,
Here.
Judkins,
Here.
Weaver, here, Michelinani.
Here. Would you please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? Oh. Well, maybe not.
Is it right outside the door? No.
Attendant is.
Oh, picture up on the.
Oh, no.
No.
Was that a yes or no?
Weaver,
I didn't even realize it was back over here.
stare at me. And do it.
That's what we're gonna do.
Please be seated.
Oh, that's a first.
That is a first.
All right, well, we'll next move on to our citizen presentation part of the agenda. I know we have several people who would like to speak, but while I remind everyone of our pillars, I'll ask Pete to check to see if there's anyone online that wants to address the council during citizen presentation. Oh, thank you.
I'll get it. Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda is approved. Next, we have our citizen presentation, and Pete is checking to see if there's anyone online. This is the opportunity for anyone to approach the council on an item that is not on the agenda. And just as a reminder, we support the pillars of character counts, endeavoring at all times to promote and model the principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. In conducting our work, we expect that everyone will act in a respectful manner consistent with these principles. So Pete, do we have anyone online?
For those participating online, if you use the raise hand function in your Zoom screen, go ahead and click on the reactions emoji at the bottom of the screen, and there you'll see raise hand. Your Honor, I don't see hands going up.
Very good. Then we'll turn to those in the council chamber. And if you'd come forward, identify yourself for the record so we know who you are. And Christy, are you first in queue?
I can go first, yeah. Christy Schmidt, I'm the Executive Director of the Clive Chamber of Commerce. I don't think you need my address, right?
We know where to find you.
Okay. I just want to give you a brief update on what the chamber has accomplished over the first few months of the year. And also I do plan to make these meetings a little more regularly. So hopefully you'll see me at least once a quarter now. So for special events this year in January, we had our West Side Legislative Breakfast, and that's a joint event with our neighboring chambers that features our state elected officials. In late February, we held our annual celebration. That's where we award our Business of the Year, the Clive Lions of Citizen of the Year, and then we do our Chamber Champion and scholarships for our high school seniors. In late March, we were honored to host a candidate forum for the city special election. So those are some of the special things we've done so far. I'm excited to tell you we've already had 9 ribbon cuttings and 1 groundbreaking this year. So super excited. Our next ribbon cutting is for Hot Works in Clive on June 10th. So you should have all got information on that. And we've also welcomed 18 new members to our organization. February 1st, we also hired Edie Beckerman as our part-time membership coordinator. She grew up in Clive and has really enjoyed reconnecting with the community. And then also 4 new business professionals joined our board of directors. As we look ahead, our intern, Grace Kelly, who was with the Waukee School to Work program, she'll be continuing through the summer. And then I think most of you have attended a Food Truck Friday so far this year. They've had record attendance, and we really enjoy that partnership with the city of Clive and look forward to the rest of those this year. Our annual golf outing is scheduled for August 25th. So I know several of you like to participate in that. And then finally, on June 1st, I will start my 11th year as the executive director of the Clive Chamber. So it's
Whoa.
really been an honor to serve the community. So thank you all. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Questions for Christy?
Christy,
Yes.
thanks so much for all your years of hard work. You've really been a bright spot and really rejuvenated the Clive Chamber. So we really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you. All right.
We,
Thank
we all concur with that. Yes, thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
And I think we have others here. Jeff, Bob, you want to flip?
Hello, council members, mayor. Good to see you all again. My name is Jeff Carter. I live at 9475 Lincoln Avenue in Clive. I've been a resident of Clive going on 40 years. I don't want to expect it, but it's been a long time living here. I come bearing good news and a second ask. The good news is about a year and a half ago, I came to you and said, you know, we have an issue with the creek with erosion control. Is there anything we can do about it? It's something we can't tell Walkie to stop building because the water keeps coming here, but we're really losing a lot of trees that are 50-year-old trees. I walk the path every day. And right now, again, this isn't a life and death situation, but as the erosion continues, it actually will become a problem for homeowners because a couple of places that I've walked, it's 2-3 feet away from the fence lines right now. So I came to you, like I said, a year and a half ago with the idea of coming up with idea of a log erosion barriers. The USD, I've got this information, I'll circle it. It's just, they do a lot for fires out in the West when they have big fires. How do you control erosion after that? And it's a very simple process and they've done it. The USDA is the ones that really know what they're doing on this. So I said, let's go ahead and try it here. You guys gave permission to do a project, a pilot project in front of my house. And I've got photos of it here.
Can you put that on the overhead?
All right. Okay, if you see these two up, this is right. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing what they did, but they did actually do it and they took the time and do it. So if you look where these trees are here, they would have been in the water. This tree was in the water today. I mean, so this is only 100 yards north of west of where I'm at. So the erosion control, like I said, it may not be aesthetically the best, but the concept works. So what I'm asking you is, like I said, I come bearing good, it works, guys. So it's something that we also, Rachel was back, it's when Rachel was here. She did the due diligence with the state and the DNR. That was a question. How do we rip-rack? I mean, lots of stuff works, but when they finally came up with, if it came from the forest or the park, they had no problem. Again, you have to double check on this, but this is what they said. And that's what they had the DNR come out and they really did some extensive work on it. And I applaud everybody for doing that. My next question is now, since Rachel isn't here, and it appears that we've got some concept that will work. Can we have somebody within the city? I mean, and if you don't have the capital for it, I'll finance it. It's not that big a deal. Just a few hours a week, having somebody do the due diligence of really what needs to happen. Because I know there's grants out there, guys. I mean, I don't think this is going to cost the city other than maybe a couple of bucks at the front end just to see what the options are. To have somebody come back and say, here's your options, city council, here's your options, because this is way beyond us, guys. This is beyond where all you guys are going to be sitting here. This is something that's going to go for the next 50 years. And there's just no plan in place for this. So I'm asking you guys to assign somebody and I'll work with them, whatever we have to do to come up with a plan. Just say, okay, this is where we sit on this. This is how we're going to handle it. We're going to do it this way and just go forward. That's what I'm asking you to think about and deliberate upon. I'm not saying who it is in your team of people. I don't know who it is, but I don't think it's going to take that much research. It's just basically somebody to do, because again, I know there's grants because I looked it up online. There's grants available for this kind of projects. And I would just like to see the city come up with a plan of this is how we're going to handle erosion control in the Greenbelt. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And this is like I said, I'll leave this behind also. This is like I said, there's so much, this is a log erosion barriers. It's known technology. It's nothing we have to come up with. And we have the products in the forest right now. So.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Susan.
I'm
Yes.
wanting some clarification on the pictures you're showing.
Yes,
Are the top two
I'm sorry. Yeah.
with the logs that have been moved up out of the creek to provide
Yes.
the erosion control? And then down below is just showing a new,
It's another 100 yards north of where, excuse me, to the west where that is.
okay.
They just came in and they kind of piled them. I mean, again, not aesthetic. You could probably, there's a lot of there's better ways of more aesthetically pleasing ways of handling it, but it's the same concept. It keeps the creek bank up to where it needs to be.
You know, I'm not so sure. I walk that a lot, that area. I'm not so sure it's about the aesthetics either, right? It's because in 10 years or 50 years, and John will be here to remember this discussion, that will all be dirt, right? Over the.
Oh, yeah, it's going, yeah, the neat thing about it is it's going behind it now. You could see how again, it was a pilot project. We didn't know if it was going to work.
Not good, but in 10 years, that erosion is going to build up, the plant life's coming back, and it's something that Doug has talked about quite often in the past of one solution, and I think it's pretty cool that it's actually working, and that used to be a big divot, right?
Yeah, and it's gone probably 30 feet since I've lived there. Again, I've been there since prehistoric days. But the fact is, guys, I've watched it. And it's something, let's just come up with if you guys can come up with a plan, but there's no plan in place. Just say, okay, when we see this, what are we going to do? Because somebody's going to have to take that tree out of the water, or it's going to float down and ruin a bridge or something. I mean, so we can kick the can, or we can actually just say, let's address it and come up with a plan and put somebody in charge of it and let them do it, because it's repeat. It's nothing we have to come up with something new each time.
Well, it sounds promising. I think none of us are erosion experts, right? So I think what we just need to do is get you connected with our staff and kind of go over the results and figure out a plan for how to move forward.
That's all I'm asking.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be
So
great.
I'm
Ted.
sure Matt can handle that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
very
Jeff.
much.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bob, your turn.
Yes, I'll go. Bob Forte, I'm with the Clive Community Foundation. I live at 16648 Maple Street in Clive. First of all, appreciate the opportunity to address the council and the city officials that are here. I'm going to take a few minutes to explain a little more about, you've heard of the event, the Battle of the Burbs. How many of you are all familiar with that, right? It's kind of our signature event for the foundation to help us raise funds to support the nonprofits in our community. And it's coming up on August the 6th at the NCMEC campus. And this started out as a summer breeze. And about 3 or 4 years ago, fortunately, we had a contact in the media with Cumulus Radio that really jumped on this thing full bore and really turned this thing into a big event. It involves 5 suburbs, as you know. It's Clive, Waukee, West Des Moines, Urbandale, and Johnston. And there's a 5K walk run, there's a 10K run, there's a kids run, which is just a blast to watch these kids. It fills up really fast. So it's great to see them, take part in the event. They have calisthenics and things like that for the kids. So NCMIC underwrites the entire the basic cost of the event itself in terms of the media promotion, using their facilities. And then the net proceeds from registration fees and other donations that are submitted or made to the event, that's split up among the 5 different suburbs. Last year, the event raised about $60,000 overall. And then the Clive Community Foundation got about $26,000 out of that. So we got a good share of that based on registrations and sponsorships that we were able to secure. This year, we're looking to probably increase the number of representatives and registrations that we have. And I have a little present for you before I leave. So the other thing about the race is that the suburb with the most registrations gets to win the WWE style championship belts for the ones you see on. It's not a little trophy, it's a big belt. And a couple of years ago, Clive was the winning suburb, and former Mayor Scott Thurxina wore the belt with pride for that year. 2020 raced in the curve because of COVID. 2021, West Des Moines they have a few more people in West Des Moines. I'm lobbying to weight their registrations versus the other suburbs. Haven't gotten a win there yet, but we're working on it. They beat Clive in registrations by about 7. I think it was like 149 to 142, something like that. So our goal is to get those bragging rights back this year. We need everybody on board to do that. It's definitely a grassroots community effort to get the belt back. And I know if you've had the pleasure of seeing the Be Like Bob video, I can send that to your homes. It's a 35-second video that we did in front of Nick Mick, and Colleen Powell did the voiceover for it. It showed me running up and down the hill at her direction. And the last scene is me running up the hill, and I have a sign in the back. It's in cardboard, the best, children's art you can get. It says Beat West Des Moines. So it's pretty funny. I'll resend that so you can get an idea what that's like. But we've had about almost 700 views of that video since we ran it. So we're serious about getting the belt back. And it's just a fun event. Nick Mick does a tremendous job. So what I've done tonight is, as a guest, I always feel like I should leave something behind. I've done a letter and a packet of what we call buck slips for everybody here, not everybody, but I do have more. One for every man, woman, and child in the city of Clive, courtesy of Nick Mick. But I want to just, Pete, I'll give these to you, and I think I got them in the right order. Just a letter to encourage you to participate. But if you can't participate, you can definitely donate. Must not be present to win kind of thing, but we could really use your support. We passed these out at our Clive Community Foundation board meeting last week. And we're making some progress, but it's going to take a real effort and a community effort to kind of, go get over the top and beat West Des Moines and get that belt back. As of last Thursday, Clive had a slight lead in registrations, but it's still early. There's a big rush in the last 5-6 weeks heading up to the race. And Susan, you have a double allocation because you're on the foundation board and you're here. So you get twice as many buck slips to pass out. Susan does a great job with that. And Mayor Edwards is already registered, right? So you're in, so he's leading by example. Not that there's any pressure on anybody to, get any more people to register, right,
This
Mayor?
is all about beating Russ Trimble. I'm in.
It absolutely is. I had a call in for him too. He hasn't returned my call yet. I was going to see if he saw the video that we
Been a little
ran.
busy up at his day job at the Hill.
I figured, well, we can find a way to get that to him one way or another. So at any rate, just appreciate your support of this event. It's a real great partnership we have with NCMIC, with the city. I also want to congratulate the Chamber and Parks and Rec for the first couple of Food Truck Friday nights. They're awesome events. They're the greatest mixers I've been to. They're a lot of fun. They do a great job with that, great atmosphere. So Christy and Richard and his team just a very good job with that. If anybody has any, as far as registration goes, there's 2 ways you can get in. One is you get on the website, you can register just for the city of Clive, or you can register under Team Clive Alive. I think that's what you did, right, Mayor? If you go for Team Clive Alive, the registration fees still go to the city, but you'll need a password. And it's in that letter. It's just CCF Clive Community Foundation. And you save a couple of bucks on the registration fees. So that's pretty much all I had. Just appreciate the opportunity. August the 6th. Hope to see a lot of you there, but hope to get that belt back and get the bragging rights back for the city of Clive. Any questions? Anybody have?
Thanks, Bob. Any
So-
question?
If we win, is the mayor required to wear the belt all day?
Every day,
Okay,
all day, every day.
I'm in then.
It'll look good with that suit, Mayor.
This is a great event. I know Susan and I walked it last year, and it's
Yep.
just really a beautiful route through Country Club. And I'd challenge everybody in the council to use their social media and really push this out. Let's really make an effort to get that belt back.
Yep, and we're going to do another video based on the rave reviews we got for the first video. We'll do another one, but it was fun to do. It was fun to kind of poke the bear a little bit in West Des Moines and get some friendly competition, because everybody wins in this thing because of the monies that go back to the community or betterment foundation of those cities. So, and Christina, I didn't have your name, but you do get some. I don't care if you live in Clive or not.
I'm a Hermodale resident, but I'm on Team Clive.
Okay, all right, very good. So, if there are no other questions, thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah.
Do we have anyone else in the chamber who wishes to address the council tonight on an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing no one approaching the podium, we'll move on to the consent item.
Move for-
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent item. further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will clerk close that vote? All right, the consent is approved by a vote of 5-0. Next, we've got some presentations. First, with our new Public Works Operations Specialist.
Your Honor, he wasn't able to make it for his introduction this evening, so we will follow up with the council on that. Sorry about that.
All right. We'll move on to the process improvement presentation from HR.
You just.
Yep. Okay, let me make this a little bit bigger for us. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm excited to provide the high-level overview of our process improvement that was implemented in late 2021. As many of you are aware, recruitment and retention efforts are more important than ever as many businesses are competing for the same applicants, while also trying to keep good employees from leaving. And that's as a result of the pandemic and the Great Resignation. Luckily, the city of Clive had the forethought to begin recruitment and retention efforts before the pandemic. So beginning in 2019, implementation of an applicant tracking software was added as part of the HR strategic goals in an attempt to increase Clive's recruitment and retention efficiencies. So while our first attempt was an improvement over those paper applications, we have continued to evolve our processes. And in June 2021, Clive partnered with NeoGov, which is a cloud-based HR software with several modules to help streamline processes and support the entire employee lifecycle. At this time, Clive has only purchased one of those modules for applicant tracking. So I'm going to go into a little bit of background here. So Revise was that kind of interim attempt at applicant tracking. This was a repository for all of our applications. So while it was an online applicant movement towards something better, it really didn't have any data analytics, which we really need to tell a story, as well as make informed decisions moving forward. It also utilized Laserfish. So for those that are here in council, you probably are aware of what Laserfish is, but it's a review of applicants. So it was a much more manual process than what NeoGov has provided to us. And the savings, which is a big incentive for us as well. The NeoGov platform actually saved us about $40,000 conservatively, and that's with an average of 50 applicants, an average of 4 staff members reviewing those applicants, handling each set of documents for approximately a quarter of an hour, and with the average wage of $34 per hour for those employees. So this also includes, them reviewing the application, saving that application, moving it forward to a hiring manager for them to review, to make those decisions on who to move forward, notifications of those candidates, and then storing those documents. Additional incentives for us. Wait for it to catch up there. So all job postings, they're automatically posted to government jobs. So it's simultaneous. Once I post it to NeoGov, it's posted on an external site as well. There are also additional discounts when adding a posting to Indeed or Monster.com or another platform. There is also a nationwide database for job descriptions. So especially for positions that we do not have currently, we can go outsource those or find additional job descriptions. And then additional improved efficiencies include the managers now being able to review those in real time. They don't have to wait for me to move those applications to a site for them to review. So as they come in, they can review it 24/7. And here are some of the other communities that are using that. So that includes Waukee, Ankeny, Johnston, Des Moines, Norwalk, and Urbandale. And there's actually approximately 30 other cities using NeoGov statewide. So this is kind of becoming more popular in the public sector. Those that are not using it currently are Grimes and Altoona, but there has been talk of them kind of moving towards a system similar. So Insight and OHC. Insight is the actual module that we purchased, and it's the applicant tracking software, and that's to help recruit and hire our candidates. It does have into that module some compliance and analytic reporting, which again helps us make more informed decisions. This dashboard is maintained by HR currently. But within Insight is OHC. So OHC is the online hiring center that all of our hiring managers utilize to review applicants, move that forward into a reject, if we're not wanting to move forward with a candidate, as well as to move forward into an interview status. And from this system, our applicants can schedule their own interview. So that's also a unique efficiency for us as well. And then we are also able to send notices, and we can create notices and send communication to our candidates, which also helps save time for us as well. And then our applicants. So this is what an applicant sees from our job page. Again, it's in real time. So as I post it to NeoGov, it's posted to government jobs, and it's posted to our website as well. So there's never a time where there would be a delay. Immediately when we know, the public knows. And again, it's a platform with one click. If an applicant goes in, they create their profile. Anytime we have another opening that they're interested in, they just go into this site and they can click it with one click. And that's not just for our community, but other communities that use NeoGov. So this is what I'm most excited about. This is the data analytics for NeoGov and in our particular module that we purchased. And this is telling us a story that we are still a preferred employer. So 22,670 people viewed our job postings for a 6-month period. From the time that we started or went live December 1st of 2021 to May 1st of this year, we've had 22,000 people view our jobs, which is incredible. Of those, we had 623 people apply for our jobs that were posted in that 6-month period. And we hired 116. So in 6 months, we hired 116 people. The majority of those are our seasonals. Obviously, it's a really busy time for that. However, I was very surprised to see beyond that how many part-time and full-time we also hired in that time frame. So you'll get some numbers there. And then of those, we filled 18 job postings. So some of these postings may have had multiple openings, but again, 18 is pretty phenomenal in a 6-month period. We also have had some super users, so especially those in fire and aquatics, and they gave us some testimonials. So Brian Helland, our assistant fire chief, NeoGov has improved our hiring process by putting everything in one location for review of the applicants. The information entered by applicants is formatted in a much more user-friendly format for both the applicant and the reviewer. You can see there's just a very positive review. And likewise for Austin Tasler, who is our recreation coordinator for aquatics. He's obviously been an incredible super user, very busy over the last few months at least, hiring all of those seasonals for our aquatic center. But again, just a very positive review. And so what is the future for us with NeoGov? So we're going to dive deeper into reporting and analytics, providing more of a story, more of those informed decisions based on what we see as far as the data. And then we're looking at additional modules for onboarding and performance management that can just, again, improve those efficiencies, make it a smoother process for our applicants and really make them feel like this is where they want to be, starting from that first click of the application. All right. So any other question or any questions for me right now?
Well, thank you, Kristen. That's a wonderful improvement. We're very pleased to see that. Anyone here have any, Shrikant?
Yeah, so I was curious, you mentioned, obviously part of this program or this module is to help us kind of get the applicants we want and make them feel welcome. Right?
Absolutely.
So does NeoGov provide kind of a turnkey solution as far as, providing all the required consents and disclosures and all of those things that are required? I know you mentioned that has a compliance aspect.
Yes, so that's part of the onboarding module that we're currently exploring. And from that, it would provide us those forms or those additional onboarding tasks that currently is a manual process for us. So thank you for asking that. But yes, absolutely. That's something that we're wanting to explore a little bit more. And I think from that too, it'll give us even more data to pull from. How well are we doing? And what does that onboarding process look like for our candidates?
And sorry, just one more follow-up. Would that save us some additional time and, in that respect, money as well? Or
it would definitely do that. I haven't really had a deep dive into what that would look like, but it would definitely save time, definitely save us some money. I just don't know what that dollar amount would look like at this time.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So is this a one-time upfront licensing fee or is it an ongoing annual maintenance fee?
From what I understand, there is a fee to it. Again, I'm not
You don't know the
100%
specifics of
sure
that?
on what that looks like. You'd have to ask my manager, Roxanne. But I'm not a part of the bill payment of that.
It'd be interesting to know just what those kind of fees are.
Absolutely.
And then when you mentioned analytics, so outside of it just being kind of interesting information, what are we doing with those analytics?
Absolutely. So what that's telling us and why I said specifically that 22,000, that tells us that people are viewing our jobs. From that 623 that applied, it means that we are getting the applicants through we can narrow down to a specific job and be able to see, are we getting the traffic? Because although those are large numbers and great positive overall, there are positions that we've had struggle or that we've struggled to fill, and we can see those that data and say, okay, what are our next steps? How can we improve this? Maybe it's changing the job description a little bit. Maybe it's posting more to social media. How can we make this a little bit more visible? Just how can we attract more and get more traffic to this particular position? Overall, I think going forward, it's going to assist us in ensuring that we continue to be successful in getting those right applicants. I think including that onboarding module may help as well. But again, we'll need to do a little bit more research as far as what that'll help us look at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric?
Kristen, love to see both the application and process improvement to get the best candidates and move them through the system, but also the regular $40,000 of taxpayer savings as well on an annual basis. So great job and look forward to hearing more about NeoGov.
Awesome. Thank you.
I actually do have one more question.
Oh, sure.
Is there a retention aspect to this too? You're talking about data analytics for onboarding and attracting applicants, but is there a retention aspect? to this
So
as well?
that's part of more of the performance management. And that would lead into more like professional development, training, and those types of things within that module. Again, they're all kind of add-ons. So it's exploring and seeing what would work best for us. What are we currently doing? And is this an improvement? It also kind of leads into another initiative with Austin Peters Group that we will be diving deeper into going forward in the next few months with performance and reviews.
Great.
Any other questions?
No,
Susan?
I yielded mine to Shrikant.
Thank you.
I wasn't sure if I was being invisible. I attended a workshop a couple days ago where employers were being encouraged to do more to communicate with applicants, even those who are not successful. And this makes me wonder, are we doing that? And is this a tool to help us keep in touch with people?
Absolutely. So we have a lot more visibility as far as where our applicants are in the process, but it also gives us the ability to communicate with them. So as I said, when we have an applicant move into the OHC or the online hiring center, we have the ability, both myself and the hiring manager, to send out communication. We can track that as well. We can see that response. And so we do have a little bit more ease in that to see not only what I'm doing, but what maybe the hiring manager is communicating to that candidate as well. And again, that's something that we'd like to dive deeper into because there's also customization that we have begun to utilize to have more frequent communication. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
Everyone else has had one.
Yeah.
She kind of had 4.
He took yours.
I agreed to give him 2 of mine.
I'll pay it back later.
And
Fantastic.
Roxanne, do you have a financial impact figure besides on the licensing?
We'll follow up with you on that.
Yeah, actually to get the solid. figures.
Okay.
We had a 2-year pricing, so.
Yeah. There was an initial and then a subscription fee. I just don't remember it off the top of my head. We'll follow up with the council on that.
All right, sounds good.
But also in regards to that communication piece, which is. really-
Roxanne, would you come to the mic?
Yeah, nobody can hear you on the mic.
In regards to that communication piece with the applicants, we also they have the capability of marking different positions within our city, that if there is a posting, they get a notification. So that's another nice feature about this whole program and hopefully will be beneficial to us in the future.
What was the cost of the yearly license of that, Roxanne, while you're up here?
We're going to get those numbers for you. Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
I think you're free to go.
All
Thank you,
right.
Christine.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Now we'll move to our action items. The first is a public hearing on Shadow Creek West rezoning. Did we publish the appropriate public notice?
Yes, Your Honor, that was published in the Des Moines Register, May 9th, 2022.
Thank you, Matthew. Amanda?
Good evening, Mayor Council. Matthew, when you can, the back cam, please. Oh, thank you. So tonight you have before you the public hearing and first consideration of a rezoning for the Shadow Creek West development. This is located at Warrior Lane here on the west boundary, and then the city green belt property is here. The area you can see in the light gray up to the right-hand side of the page there is our Shadow Creek North developments that I believe you are all fairly familiar with at this point. So the property in question tonight for the rezoning is a 53-acre parcel that the developer is proposing to develop as 88 single-family home lots. This would be consistent with the future land use plan of residential low density. And the developer is proposing to construct what would certainly be considered high-end homes, though most of Clive on this area has already been pretty high-end, but we're seeing that continuation with the same developer that's done Plat 4 through 10 so far for Shadow Creek. The minimum lot sizes that they're looking at for this are larger than the minimum lot sizes in our previous plots at 11,000 square feet being the minimum. Most of the lots shown here are actually larger than 13,000. There's, I think, only 2 that get down to that 11,000 minimum. They're proposing our fairly typical 30-foot front and rear setbacks. We are going to propose some staggered setbacks on a couple of the cul-de-sac bulbs to address some of the concern we've seen with those in previous developments where the house ends up sitting kind of awkward to its neighbor. So those lots will have some specific setbacks called out in the zoning change and development agreement for your consideration in the future. And staff can provide an exhibit at that time as we finish working through those with the developer. They are proposing to use a 7-foot side yard setback, which has been used throughout parts of the other Shadow Creek plots. And continuation of the architectural review committee that this developer established with the Shadow Creek Plat 4. And we've seen a lot of success with that. Staff and I believe council has been quite happy with the home designs we've seen being built in this area. So we'd like to continue that with this development as well. We are still working with the developer for final determination of the minimum required home square footages. Some of that conversation will come out of your direction tonight based on what you would like to see for some of these enhancements I'm going to talk about here. But right now for the ranch home, they are proposing between 1,550 square feet to 1,800 square feet for the minimum, 1,800 to 2,000 square feet for the half story, and for the 2-story homes, 2,000 to 2,200 square feet for the minimums. There's some financial analysis that we're still working on that will determine what the most appropriate minimums are there. The lower range of those would be consistent with the Shadow Creek North development agreement as well. So it'll be at least the same as that, if not larger for those minimums. The developer does hope to have the development agreement provide them some additional flexibility that will allow them to create a unique character and sense of place for this development. It is kind of on its own in the city, the way it's hemmed in with the Greenbelt and Little Walnut Creek there, and then Warrior Lane on the side. So unfortunately, it doesn't have any connectivity to other developments, but that leaves it in a unique situation to have some features that we don't usually see in some of our developments. So one of those items that they're looking at is doing some enhanced entry features for the roads off of Warrior Lane. There's a sketch here that the developer had prepared. You can see it's a similar stone that we have, like the Eden stone pattern in other parts of the community. And then some nice landscaping around the corners. This point, they're considering those being located on either side of the entrances, possibly for both of those roads coming from Warrior Lane. And then there is a photo of a similarly designed kind of inspiration feature that actually exists, obviously not in Clive, but for a Mills Farm development that the developer was familiar with. Another item that they're hoping to break away from some of our standard zoning would be for the landscape buffer that we require along arterial roadways within the community when we have the single family homes back up to those. The typical that is shown on this is our underlying zoning requirement for the 30-foot landscape buffer. But based on council's direction tonight, if you would like to see them do something more unique here, the developer will work on preparing a landscape typical that we can bring forward for discussion at the next meeting. So the idea they have put out to staff is to do kind of clustering of trees or croppings of trees throughout to create a little more variety in the planting plan, as opposed to what we see frequently along the arterials, having the consistent number of overstory and understory, and then the larger deciduous trees with the evergreens as well. So they're looking to be a little more unique here. For this project, there is no additional parkland dedication that is required. The developer over dedicated land in the previous developments through Shadow Creek Plat 4 and Shadow Creek North. The lay of the land on this one, you can see it's kind of a longer skinny lot that's a bit awkward. There is also a pretty significant drop from what would be 183rd Street down to where we would meet the Greenbelt. It doesn't really leave any opportunity for them to dedicate land that would be active recreation area. So they knew that years ago when we were working through the other plats, and they worked with staff proactively to address that for this development at that time. We are still working with the developer on the ultimate ownership of some of the outlots that you can see have floodplain in them. So some of that may come to the city to be incorporated into the Greenbelt Park. But again, we're still working through some of those agreements based on your feedback tonight. There is one trail connection shown near the south portion of the development here that will go to the the future construction of the Greenbelt Trail. You can see that lightly shown for the proposed general alignment for that would connect with what is proposed to be done in the future by the city for the Shadow Creek North development as well. And that'll go along with our extension from where the trail currently stops around Alice's as it makes its way west towards Warrior. We are continuing to work with them on a secondary trail access point towards the north end of the development around what would be lots 11 and 12. The concern with trying to get the trail through that area is that elevation drop is around 24 foot from the front of the lot to where it would meet the green belt. So we are still evaluating if that is practical to have a secondary trail connection within the development. We do think it would have to exceed the 5% grade at minimum to be able to be constructed. That's the typical design target you would use. But if it is determined to be non-feasible to have a second connection in this area, there is a trail connection right here, kind of off the map, that was platted with Shadow Creek Plat 6. And that would provide all of these homes to have access to a trail connection within a 1/4 mile walk, which is our target, that you'd want to be at a 1/4 mile walk or less. So if we can't get that trail connection to work, we are still meeting our target there of that trail accessibility. Let's see. Provision of utilities for this development were largely extended with Shadow Creek Plat 6, so they are ready to go and will be fairly easy extensions for the water and sanitary sewer. The developer is also working on securing a water main easement from the property owner just north here. It's Todd Quam's property. He is the only property between this plat and where Shadow Creek Plat 6 starts. So getting that water main connected with this development to provide that secondary source of water in the event that there was a breakage somewhere for these homes. So they are working on securing those easements now, and the intent would be to install the water main with this development. The stormwater will be partially managed in the existing pond here for Shadow Creek Plat 6. Approximately the north half to third of the development will drain that way. And then staff is still working with the developer on the exact stormwater management design that would take place down in this southern portion for the half that drains to the south rather than the north. That plan is still being determined for what exactly the facilities would be. At this point, it's possible that they could be either a dry or wet basin design. So we're still working through those kinds of details. So tonight we would like direction from council on if you like the idea you're hearing with the design variations to allow those larger entry features and some variation from our typical landscape buffer. So we can continue working through those items with the developer. And Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of the rezoning subject to resolution of all the remaining staff comments in the letter.
Thank you, Amanda. Comments? We'll start on this side.
Yeah, can you put that map back up? Could you walk us through the bike trail connections again, the one on the far south, and then where does that go? If you could kind of outline it or use a pen or your finger to outline where that trail runs north to south.
Yes, so I'll try to draw it here for you. So the proposed alignment, this would be Westgate Parkway, whoops, off the screen. Westgate Parkway right here. There is a connection. It's not yet constructed. It'll be done by the city when we get to that point. You are all familiar with Waukee Sanitary Sewer Extension and then the stream bank restoration that will take place following that. So we will not be constructing any trail until those projects are done. But at that time, the trail connection come from Westgate and then follows along behind Plat 6, where it then has an option to go north. And this is where it kind of loops around to Warrior Lane for a trail access in that location. And then there is also the trail that will run generally like that, that may also connect to Warrior Lane down at the south. So the connection that is proposed comes through, I believe it'll be right here, would come down and connect the neighborhood to the trail. The connection that we are not confident yet if the grades will work and wouldn't really be able to determine that until we're at the construction drawing phase, would come through this general area to connect across the forebay of the pond to the trail extension. So as with our other development projects in this area, the developer would have the responsibility to grade those trail connections through the neighborhood and provide those easements. And then the city actually comes in and does the surfacing of those once we've extended the Greenbelt Trail to those locations.
So the north-south portion of that trail is going to run through all those backyards? Is that?
There's some
Yeah.
outlots back here, and then this is already the city Greenbelt property. So the exact alignment isn't yet determined. This is just kind of the high-level design concept. It'll have to be fully designed and grades engineered and everything before it could be constructed in that area. Much of that trail location will be outside of the grading limits of this project, so they won't be necessarily creating that entire planned trail grade. If they tried to do that grading at this time, it would also likely be messed up through the sanitary sewer installation and stream bank restoration. So the city would then come into the future for that trail construction and get those areas prepped.
So that answers my follow-up question of access to the public to the pond. That would be their access to go fishing or what have you into that pond would be right off the bike trail? And would they then have,
Yes.
they would legally have access to?
Yep. So this outlot W, the city actually is already the owner of through Plat 6 development. Part of that stormwater agreement that the city entered was that that would continue to service this development. So the city won't take over the maintenance responsibilities of that until we've met those typical development thresholds, which is usually around 75% of the lots draining to it. I think that is the number that was used in that agreement. So at that time, then the city would have the full maintenance and everything. I do believe that that pond is probably large and deep enough that it could be stocked with fish, but that would be ultimately up to the city's decision on how they wanted to manage that area.
Yeah.
I was glad you brought up the parkland dedication issue because I was looking at this thinking, that's a lot of homes to not be served by a park. Just how far is it to the parkland that was dedicated before?
Yeah, so most of the parkland that was dedicated through Shadow Creek North was for extension of the Greenbelt facilities. This right here, Shadow Creek Plat 4, you kind of lose it off the screen here, but that trail follows down along Westgate Parkway. And then we have generally in this area, Circina Park that's under development right now between Shadow Creek Plat 3 and the courtyards at Shadow Creek. So that would be the neighborhood's primary park access at this point would be in this general area. And then there is future plans that when that agriculture land to the east of that develops, it will be a larger park that would have playground and those kinds of amenities.
Eric?
I remember in the past, when we working with this developer, when we changed it to from R1 to PUD, we had some reservations, but I thought they really did a nice job with how they use the flexibility to create some different homes and they're not all cookie cutter, and really appreciated that right there. Sounds like you're happy with the stormwater management plan, then Amanda, staff is fine with that?
Yeah, so at this point, we know that generally the proper land areas and types of stormwater management are under consideration. So we don't have any concern that finalizing that plan will impact any of the lots that are shown.
You know, I understand there's some elevation differences on that, the north setup there, but I would like to see, you know, let's be creative on that. And I think we can find a way to work through that so that, you know, they don't have to walk a quarter mile or get on the streets to have access to that trail. It's important as we build these developing neighborhoods, they do have access to these trails. And there's gotta be a way we can find a way to make that work.
Even if it's further south from where you're
Yeah.
proposing, right down towards the entrance and go straight into the, you know, I come off Warrior Lane and coming in from Waukee and I can cut over into that pond and on a bike trail and hit that backside. But I agree with Eric. There
Without
needs
hitting the
to be
streets, you know.
another access point inside something so big. And to Susan's point, without a park, I don't remember that dedication. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but that's a little bit of hoodwinked to me that you got us on a dedication earlier and now we slide off with a huge development like this with no formal park. I think that bike trail is a must.
Great.
Good.
So, Amanda, is the rezoning from R1 to PUD primarily just to increase the density? Or are there other?
In this case, it is definitely not going to result in increased density since these are will be quite a bit larger than the minimum requirements in the underlying R1 zoning district. It lets them get some of that flexibility for like the staggered setbacks along the cul-de-sacs, the 7-foot side yard setbacks. Some of the dimensions on here angle a little bit more. So we've crafted the language in the development agreement draft that the minimum lot width of 70 feet, which again, most of these far exceed that. There are only a few lots that really hit that, will be measured at the front building line instead of the underlying definition in our zoning code. Actually, it says it's measured at the rear property line building setback. So in cases like this lot here, you see it pinches there. So your rear setbacks around here, your house is really going to be all the way up here. So that lot is more than sufficiently sized. So it lets some flexibility around those things. And then getting specifics in the development agreement for those entry features, the landscaping differences, minimum design requirements for the homes and sizes is really why the developer is pursuing the PUD in this case.
Fair enough. Is the dotted lines, is that indicative of where the creek is?
Yes, so the kind of bigger dash line here would be the floodway. And the tighter dash line would be the 100-year floodplain. So the creek is basically more or less in the middle of that floodway line.
Okay, that's my thought. So that's my question. So we're 100% comfortable then that the homes that are closest to that creek have no flood or erosion issues, because we've run into that in the past where we have homeowners who are fairly close to the creek and they're getting all kinds of erosion problems and they blame the city because we didn't do our diligence up front. Whether that's right or wrong, that was their perspective that, you know, when we were originally doing these development plans, we didn't make the developer do what they needed to do to ensure that their property wasn't flooded repeatedly. So we're 100% confident on that with these adjacent properties.
Yes, with the elevation drop and how much higher the homes will be, definitely is much less of a concern there. This lot, these lots up here are, I want to say about 220 foot of depth. So if you compare that line to these, you're getting 350, 400 foot deep lots in that general range. So the home is very, very far away from the creek, even on those ones where it seems closer. And then in locations, they have pulled out these outlots. So for instance, like here, this portion is outlot.
Okay.
No structure.
So those are outlots.
Developed
okay.
on those.
Okay. Okay, good. And then so for that buffer area, you're asking for guidance there. I guess I'm still a little hazy on what exactly we're being asked to provide guidance for. You know, what are the options there? What are they proposing? Do we have any renderings or anything that we can look at?
We don't have any renderings of it yet at this point. So the question before you is, are you willing to see something that would likely result in fewer trees planted within that typical buffer, but would be a kind of higher design with some clustering and more species diversity mixed in that creates a little more character? So it would certainly be fewer trees than what we typically see where we get kind of the solid wall of trees that are planted.
Is there any kind of berm there or is it pretty flat?
There is berm in some areas right now without Warrior Lane being improved to the full 5-lane section. We can't guarantee exactly what that future design elevation will be for the finished roadway. So portions of the property likely won't have significant berming around it once that is designed. But with that road construction being, you know, maybe 10 to 15 year time frame, it's too far out for us to really have that level of design detail at this point.
So I'll just speak for myself. I'm open to looking at it. This is going to be a busy area, I believe. And so my initial, you know, inclination is that I would rather see a nice buffer between a busy road and this many houses, especially for this type of high-end home. But that's just again, I'm open to seeing it, but that's my inclination.
I'll agree with you on that. And I would even take it a step further. I'd say if we're gonna, my opinion on this is if we're gonna be open to something like that where there's less density, we want to integrate some of the other stormwater management features and the soil quality, controls that we're doing in other parts of town, like maybe the pollinator gardens or, something that builds that aspect of the program that we're trying to build throughout the city.
Sure.
Michael?
Just on Ted's comment, and you had said we're 10 years away or 15. I mean, to Ted's comment, now is the time we assure what happens, because you just said you're unsure what could happen in the elevation once that road is built, right? Today, we could assure what that looks like by putting a berm in or some other type of features where we don't care what Warrior Lane does in 10 years. We already have our set in there. So it'll be hard for me to get past that. To another point of Ted's is I am nervous about that because in the back or where you have of the properties, though they're 400 feet, it always comes back to the city regardless, right? If they're 400 feet or not. As Mr. Carter was here earlier today, he has quite a long lot. It's not into his yard yet, and he's concerned already. These folks will be yelling prior to it getting to their yard. And when it's in their yard, even though we can say it's 400 feet from your house, it's in their yard, right? It's in their own property. And so that's going to be a problem, whether it's real or perceived, it's going to be an issue. Last comment on that is the trails, those coming in, those access points, we'll be putting in later. Would the association be taking care of, the homeowners be taking care of the snow removal on those, as well as the ones that go behind their house, like we have had other homeowners do in the past?
Yeah, so the easement, we would use our typical language that we have in there, that the homeowner, for most of those, is responsible for the snow removal on the portion of the trail that is like the connector that runs along their property. And then the city would take care of the actual like snow removal for the remainder of the like primary Greenbelt Trail.
Even if it does go through their property in the back, as you have that line shown. You do it, and a couple of those lots have.
City is currently the one that takes care of the snow removal.
She's saying those
for
are
the
outlots, not actual property.
The trail won't actually be in like backyards here. These lines here are outlots, so the
Even
trail
that
is.
one right, I can't. When you take that corner there, that's an outlot. That's a long 400-foot. No, next one.
This one
Yeah,
is
those
outlots.
three.
This is an outlot.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
No building on it.
The only other, I just wanted to make one more comment that I agree with what the other council members were saying is that we should really try to work with the developer and get creative about putting in a small park somewhere. I know there's elevation challenges like you said, but having a small park I think would be really valuable.
Sure, we can look into that opportunity. I did want to make clarification on my comment for the not knowing for sure the elevation of the road. Typically, when you go from the rural section to the urban section, the road gets lower. So without having that designed, we don't know how low the road is going to get, but it does usually drop in elevation, which would then kind of increase any berm level in that area. It's not likely that it would rise significantly.
I really like what Country Club, when you go down Hickman, you see that those berms in those backyards, right? And that's how I envision this, but.
Any further questions? If not, we're looking to close the public hearing.
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
The motion, a second to close the public hearing. Further discussion? Hearing none, would the council please vote? And then would the clerk please post those votes when they come in? Motion to close the public hearing passes by a vote of 5-0. We're looking at the first consideration.
Move that ordinance number 1121, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
A motion and a second for the first reading of the ordinance. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? First reading passes by a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Amanda. Liz, we have a public hearing on the budget amendment. Did we publish the appropriate public notice? Matthew?
Yes, Your Honor, that was also published on May 9th, 2022 in the Des Moines Register.
Liz?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. What you have before you this evening is our annual process where we go through and amend our budget, which was adopted 18 months ago. In the memo, I outlined the overall changes for each of the functions. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on that.
Any questions for Liz?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Before we do, is there anyone here in the chamber that wishes to address the council on this matter? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And the clerk, please post that vote to close the public hearing. That passes by a vote of 5-0 to close the public hearing. We're looking for a resolution.
I'll move a resolution approving the FY22 amendment.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the resolution. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote? And will the clerk please post that vote? The budget amendment is approved by a vote of 5-0. Next item on the agenda is animal control sheltering services. Lieutenant.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. As you know, we're transitioning from our current animal control situation to a new program. We're working with Polk County and again with Furry Friends. But for you tonight, we just have a first consideration of the ordinance. There, we had to write some changes into that to accommodate the new 2080 agreement that is going to be before you also. Not a whole lot of changes, just added a few definitions. It covers specifically the TNR program, Trap, Neuter, Spay, Release program that's managed by Furry Friends. And then a little bit with disposition of animals as far as timeframes go. Britt Ganya, thank you, from Furry Friends is here. So she can answer any questions that you would have, particularly with the TNR program, this Trap, Neuter, Spay, Release, where we talk about wild animals, wild cats, which we now term as community cats. So that definition is also included in the new ordinance. But along with that, we have two resolutions, one to terminate the current 2080 agreement between City of Clive and Furry Friends, and which that would terminate on the 30th of June. And then a new 2080 that would go into effect on July 1 between us and Furry Friends. So take any questions you have, or Britt, I'm sure we'll be able to answer.
Does this agreement cover geese?
No, not yet. Not unless they're rabid geese, then yes, we could probably get those included. Yeah.
Sheep and goats get a free get out of jail.
Mhm.
I saw that in there.
Yes.
What I also offer, Your Honor, is legal counsel's reviewed the ordinance changes in the 2080 agreements. We worked through those the last couple of weeks, and this is a change to the program. City of Urbandale has made a similar change. They're also renewing their agreement, restructuring the agreement with Furry Friends. They've actually already approved that. They were a little bit ahead of us and are also implementing a TNR program. So we're excited to see how that can be implemented and definitely help Furry Friends. And I know Britt can speak to this in terms of managing that population and the challenges that come with that and the opportunities that we would have with this program. Again, we don't have a significant issue here in Clive, but when you have those rare occurrences where they can be significant, this is a nice tool to be able to manage that. But I don't want to speak too much as an expert, as I'm not by any means on that subject. Britt definitely is. So if you have any questions or need to talk through that, we've got her here tonight to do that. But we really appreciate the relationship we've had with Furry Friends. Its location is very convenient for our residents. Even though the West Pet arrangement has broken apart, it's my understanding that all those communities are still maintaining the relationship with Furry Friends and using it as the animal sheltering portions of their program. And with the new facility that they've constructed, it's a great asset for our community that we want to continue to take advantage of, and is an asset that the city doesn't have to maintain, which is a key aspect of this.
First reading.
I'd move that ordinance number 1123, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
First reading. Second.
The
Further,
agreement, Your Honor, isn't effective till July 1.
We can do the full readings on this.
very good. Further discussion.
Yes.
Susan.
I'm interested in understanding how the fees for impoundment connect to how we operate today. Are we charging for impoundment right now, or how are we evolving here?
Typically, those fees go back on the animal's owner once they're located.
Is it the same amount, or are we increasing here, or it's a new
It's
fee?
You probably want to explain how the TNR program actually reduces some fees to the city by doing that. I'll let Brett describe that.
Britt Gagne, Furry Friends Refuge. So the main difference from the old 28E and the new 28E between the city of Clive and Furry Friends would be that there is like a slight increase of maybe about 5% or so for the one-time user fee each year, to help increase costs with repairs and different things that we have with our building. Otherwise, the fees that are charged for impoundment or for unreclaimed animals boarding, that's the same as it's always been to the city. The difference would be also there that for those cats who are now going to be going into the TNR program versus the old way that we were impounding all of these cats and then stashing them everywhere until we could find barn homes for them, that will go down to $20, whereas before it was charged $40 for the city. So there should be actually some decrease by using TNR, but otherwise the rest of the fees minus the just cost of additional repairs and everything remain the same.
So I'm mostly concerned about residents who lose a pet, you know, and end up reclaiming it. Are those fees staying the same?
Correct. Those fees are prescribed by the city, by I think a separate arrangement that you guys have listed. There's some appendix or something that indicates those. And so those are actually not prescribed by this 28E, but they're prescribed by the city.
Yep. No change.
Further questions? If not, the council may vote. And the clerk may post the vote. So the first reading of ordinance passes by a vote of 5-0. Next item we have is a resolution on the dissolution of the 28E. So moved.
Second.
The motion and a second on the dissolution. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote on the resolution? And the clerk posts that. That passes by a vote of 5-0. The final item is a new 2080.
Move the resolution.
Second.
And we motion and a second. Further discussion? Yes, Michael.
I just have to ask this question because it's just bothering me, but so I like the new program, but we catch a cat and we put it in this program and then it's released. What does that mean, released? Like you're going to bring it back to where it was caught and just let it go, or you just like randomly take it out and just let it go? Or?
So once a community cat comes in, it's spayed or neutered, and once it recovers, it's released back to the area where it was caught. The ears are clipped so that we can identify them fairly easily. So if it gets trapped again, we know that it's already been spayed or neutered, and we don't have to worry about bringing it back. But the idea being that you put cats that have been fixed back in that area, they can no longer breed, and that's going to help diminish the population over time.
So they'll defend their territory.
what if we have a habitual offender?
And the defender.
It's creating problems that we've already trapped it and it's still, attacking other cats or, creating a nuisance, something of that nature. What would
We
the
are,
procedure be?
Relocate.
that's a unique situation. I think we could discuss relocation at that point. There's not a whole lot else we can do with it other than just leave it back in that area. As Matt said, to defend its territory and prevent further breeding in the area. But I think those situations are going to be
Few and far between.
very few. Yes. The number of wildcats that we have coming in is pretty low to begin with, but
Community cats?
repeat offenders, once they go through it, they don't want to do it again. So.
All righty. Any further discussion? Hearing none, would the council please vote? And then the clerk, please post that vote. I knew, Mayor. I never knew. Passed by a vote of 5-0. Thank you all. Great. Next, we have the flood plan. Doug.
Thank you. As we discussed about a month ago, we're now moving forward with a change in direction to a degree with respect to the University Boulevard Flood Mitigation Plan. Based on the work that was completed by Stantec and your discussion and direction at the last meeting, staff has begun work on the implementation related to the next iteration of the flood buyout plan for that area. So what you have before you tonight is a couple of different actions related to that previous discussion. One is receive and file of the actual report that was completed by Stantec under contract. This would be the conclusion of that project effort. Secondly, we have a resolution authorizing the city manager to begin the acquisition process. And that has a specific geographic area that we've previously discussed. It lists all of the properties within the university buyout area that are subject to flood risk, which is about 53 properties. Not that we're going to be acquiring all 53 properties and not that we're necessarily acquiring all 53 properties within the very near future. It's simply identifying the target area for those properties that have flood risk at the time that those property owners voluntarily decide that they are interested in selling to the property. We will work with that property owner to accomplish the acquisition principally through the leveraging of federal funds, hazard mitigation funds, which brings me to the third piece for you tonight, which is directing the city manager to begin the processing associated with making federal requests for hazard mitigation funds that are related to two specific open declarations that would provide us potentially with could be up to $1 million or $1.5 million to get us going on this first phase of buyouts within this new program itself. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions on this side? Eric.
So can you walk us through the implementation strategy on choosing how that was chosen right there? The first implementation being the properties south of University on that.
This is the red bound area is all of the properties that have flood risk in the University Boulevard area. They are broken up into color coded areas 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I want to continue to reiterate and make sure everyone understands, we're not prioritizing the acquisition of properties within 1, 2, 3, and 4. The representation of those areas is subject to characteristics that make properties similar or characteristics that may allow us to leverage certain types of hazard mitigation funding. So those properties that are identified as 1, simply the numeral 1, south of the boulevard, are all related to the fact that there's severe potential for flood hazard on those buildings because of its adjacency to the creek. And then as we also know through our Stantec work, if we are able to acquire those properties, at some point that would allow us the opportunity to meander the stream and create additional flood storage benefits. So those properties, again, because of their unique considerations, are grouped into 1, area. The properties in with the numerical number 2 are all commercial properties north of the boulevard that have significant flood risk. So they have a unique set of circumstances for those properties. 3 is related to the non-commercial properties, so the residential properties principally. And those are again going to have a unique means at which we acquire federal funds for those acquisitions. And in some cases, we may be looking for non-federal sources to do those acquisitions so that we do not have the residual impacts of idling that property in perpetuity. And then those properties identified as the 4 also have flood risk, but they also have the ability in some cases to help themselves, if you will, whether or not that's structural specific mitigation measures, the installation of engineered solutions, or in some cases, the properties are large enough in terms of their ownership where redevelopment may allow them to elevate the property or do other types of measures, again, through a redevelopment process. So although we've broken them into unique areas, they are not prioritized in terms of the city's efforts to do acquisitions.
So we'll continue with our voluntary buyout strategy and just implement this, and we'll be able to have access to some of those federal funding programs.
Yes, and I would also mention that based on your direction at the last meeting, staff have put together correspondence to all of the property owners within the buyout area, requesting their thoughts in terms of their prioritization and their level of interest. We have received enough responses even to this point where the recommended hazard mitigation grant application that you'll be considering tonight, we have more than enough people to fill that. We also have more than enough people to fill what would be the end of the year FMA mitigation request. So we'll likely proceed with that. So at this particular point, there is enough community interest in the buyout program itself that we'll be able to stay busy, if you will, for quite some time and chase these federal dollars as best we can.
Further questions?
Yeah, I also had a question related to some of the, like, for example, the items that you've identified in sector 3, right? The residential, the non-commercial buildings. We've talked about that this is a phased program, right? It's not going to happen overnight. And then we've also talked about, one of the concerns is how do we keep those members in our community, in our area, right? Both on the commercial side and the residential. I know I may be getting a little ahead of myself because I know what's coming up next. But has there been any thought or is there a possibility to time the 86th Street, some of those programs where we're going to see some new commercial and residential sectors come up along that area so that some of these people that are maybe it's easier for them to volunteer to sell their home if they know they can move to another area in the same district, the same neighborhood, and they can still their kids can go to the same school, they can have the same friends, they can have that continuity of life, and they stay in Clive.
Yes, that is certainly one of the more significant aspects of this flood buyout program in general. We know that there are property owners that, just by the nature of the market that we're in right now, both on the residential side as well as the commercial side, the idea of getting out of the flood risk makes very good sense to property owners. But the concern about finding a new place to live or a new place to operate my business in a facility or in a property that maybe I've owned outright now, or is at a price point that the mortgage is affordable, if you will. In this marketplace, that is one of the major impediments for some of the property owners in this area to say, yes, I am ready in terms of minimizing my flood risk, but no, I am not ready to sell because I have no place to go. We've not fully cracked that riddle yet. We have been investigating and pursuing conversations around how we could source funding to help with that piece of the puzzle. Because as we've been talking about, the hazard mitigation funding and all the other sources that we've been working on are all related to the real estate.
So, sorry, I mean to cut you off, but so would some of the medium density and, you know, multi-use developments that we have that, you know, we're going to talk about next with the 86th Street District, would those be potential solutions that if we time those appropriately, those would be available to those residents that are, you know, it would make it, again, it would make it easier for them to volunteer, like
Sure.
you said, knowing that they might have an option there.
Certainly, if timing is right, the challenge we have with the 86th Street plan and concept itself is most of the redevelopment related efforts are private efforts.
Right.
So we're relying on developers or existing property owners to make investments to create those types of spaces. In this particular case, that may or may not match up with owner expectations here. For the buyout area itself, again, although the city is not offering relocation assistance, the type of acquisition that we're completing, fair market value based on appraisal, in essence, no commissions or real estate transaction cost. And we're and we're trying to reduce as many expenses as possible so that, you know, if you will, a property owner has a little more ability to stretch that dollar on a new property. Again, it may or may not be within the city of Clive, although again, we would very much like that they'd be able to find a place in Clive. We also know that can be quite challenging.
Doug, the simple solution, just give them my business card. I got it taken care of.
Well, and if there's a way we can incentivize those developers to, you know, those private developers, if there's a way we can incentivize them to do things like that, you know, give them, you know, some sort of reason to come in and do that in the time frame that we want, and maybe even offer, you know, I don't know, something that makes it more attractive to those folks.
Yes, and I think you will hear quite a bit about the opportunities for producing that type of housing product within this district itself. And then at a subsequent meeting, when we talk about the implementation, we do have some ideas on how we may go about incentivizing. And obviously incentivizing requires efforts and trade-offs and so forth. So those kinds of things, which are a little bit outside of our normal type of development, will definitely be things that we present before you folks to get your ideas on in terms of do they or should we look at those as opportunities that they will be a little bit unique for us.
Thanks. And I want to thank Mike for giving me his time again.
You're welcome. So do we have further questions? If not, I think we're.
Move to receive and file the University of Boulevard flood mitigation plan.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Ted. Further discussion? Seeing none, with the council, please vote. And with the clerk, post that vote. And that passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move the resolution authorizing the acquisition of property located in the University Boulevard area.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And will the clerk post that vote? That passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move the resolution authorizing application for FEMA's hazard mitigation grant program to support the flood prone property buyout program.
Second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, would the council please vote? And the clerk, please post that vote. That passes by a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Doug. Amanda, we're back to you.
Pete, I may need your assistance to get the screen share set up down here. Tonight, we are excited to have Brad Shive with HKGI here to present the initial recommendations and key takeaways from the 86th Streets Neighborhood Plan. We are not going to go through all the planning process, public engagement, a lot of those kinds of items tonight. You all have been involved in those conversations largely throughout the process. So if you do have any specific questions, we're happy to answer those. We're really going to try to focus and take advantage of our time here tonight with you to really get to those key takeaways and goals that we've established. At a future meeting, we will bring back more detailed implementation for you all to have input on. But the goal from tonight's meeting is really to get your direction and feedback on those recommendations, make sure we're on the right track, and that we'll have the commitment of the city behind a lot of what's in this plan. So again, being the oldest neighborhood in the city, with also having redevelopment and infill potential, many of the recommendations will require the city to be a very active participant and take on challenges that are outside of our comfort zone and things we haven't necessarily done on projects before. Like Councilmember McElhaney was alluding to there with some of those incentives we may have to offer to see a lot of this become reality. So just a couple key priority areas that staff wanted to remind you of. One is the circulation throughout the neighborhood. We heard that a lot through both the public engagement and the engagement we did with potential developers in the area. They really focused on the importance of that and that relationship with one of the community's great assets is the Green Belt, making sure those connections and circulation are one of our top priorities here, really embracing those challenges when they come forward to us to make those connections. Also then, of course, the Linnaean Park and Harbach Center areas and realization of those future improvements. And then, as Doug was just discussing, the flood-prone buyout area. So with that, I will turn it over to Brad to walk through this with you guys.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. I'm Brad Shive. I'm with HKGI. We're out of Minneapolis, and we're the lead firm. They represented a team of people, including Emmons and Olivier Resources, EOR. They're stormwater, water resource experts. Civic Brand, which is kind of a unique firm that does a lot of branding and marketing and engagement, creative engagement processes. And then Market Advisors, which brings a real estate development team that was more of an advisor to us as we walk through the process and we're thinking about redevelopment. It's always a challenge to take a project like this, which encompassed 2 years. I know it was a long time. This is a big milestone for me, and I'm sure you were all waiting to get to this point. But to try to encompass this in a quick time period, and Amanda gave me that charge as I went way over on the Planning Commission discussion, but to take all of that and distill it down to 10 minutes of chat. So I'm going to try to hit on some of those high points and then leave more time for discussion. That was a great question you asked, Doug. And a challenging question, and actually one in all of our discussions and dialogues, we never really talked about that as an opportunity. But I want to emphasize a few things. You started this process, quite honestly, when you did your comprehensive plan update back in 2016. And you said, okay, we've got these districts in the city and we're going to start looking at things from a neighborhood perspective. So we started out at that 10,000 foot level, and now we're getting down to the 5,000, maybe 1,000 foot level. And there was a lot of push to kind of get down to that 10 foot level, deal with the site level. But we were largely at the neighborhood, and we got to the block, and that block is where you see some of these design components that again serve as this framework. As a framework, we finally got to the point where we have this draft and we're moving through the approval process. Then the hard work really starts. You get challenged with those questions that you just had that dialogue about. How do you implement it? And we've provided some direction on that. And as Amanda mentioned, we'll provide more. But the big challenges for the implementation side of it is you as a policymaker group and your willingness to hold to that vision and really keeping the long-term in mind, taking that long-term view, because that is the biggest challenge when we get presented with a really cool short-term benefit, but it compromises that long-term vision. And that's the challenge that I would put to you to think about as we move between now and when you finally adopt this. And then also, as Councilmember Klein mentioned as he walked in, be willing to make the investment. And the investment is both in capital resources. We threw a lot of project ideas in here. Some of them are very expensive. Back when you did the plan in 2004, big ideas, very expensive. One of the reasons you haven't seen the corridor actually change a lot, because that was a big move. But also staff resources and time and effort and political capital in implementing it. And so you have to be willing to make those investments. And as we talk through this, that's something to keep in mind. So we got to the point where we kind of distilled this into a series of key topics. Green infrastructure was one. We talked about green infrastructure because when we went through the community engagement process, that's what we heard a lot of. Natural resource, protect open space, demonstrate more of that. And we know we got to deal with stormwater. So let's think about it in terms of green infrastructure. Parks and open space and the recreational component, not just Linnean Park, but the whole district. Even though we focused a lot on Linnean Park, that's a big move, that's an important aspect, but we looked at the whole district. The floodplain buyout, I'm not going to talk a lot about that because Doug has just talked a lot about that, and I know that's one that's fresh in your mind. And honestly, we did a lot of looking into that and said, you know, keep the course you're on. Circulation, one of the major components of the engagement, said we need to think about how to make this a better walkable, pedestrian-oriented district. And then redevelopment and economic development. You know, we know the corridor is largely an auto-oriented corridor, largely a low-level, single story uses. And so the challenge is, how do you reinvent that? How do you reinvigorate that? And we talk a lot about density relative to that. Economic development. One of the things a lot of people talk about, and today you see maybe a lot of this news stories or places you go visit. Excuse me, getting a dry throat here. What are the strategies we can employ to create activity, to enliven the district? And another little sidebar, one of the great experiences we've had when we're working with staff, they've got a wall, I think it's in Doug's office. A wall is plastered with all these creative, innovative ideas on how you activate spaces. And so some of the stuff that you see in here are simple ideas like that, that try to create opportunities and instill ideas, not just public, but private too. But we need to create the environment and the mechanism for it to happen. Housing is the last category we talked about. And housing was one where we kind of came to the conclusion we really don't have a problem per se with housing today. We have a lot of housing built at the same time period. We're talking about new introduction of new housing types, some of it high density. Well, we have a lot of high density, but it's new. It's a different time period, and it is diversifying that housing stock. But a lot of the housing is programmatic. And how do we preserve and maintain those strong neighborhoods today? How do we lift up and help some of the struggling housing become better, but at the same time prevent gentrification and losing some of the affordability? So all of those things are the pieces that we went through, and I'm just going to highlight some of those and walk through those on the screen here. And we have the full document if you are interested in getting into some of the questions. So I'm just going to highlight the key recommendations. Green infrastructure. We think about green infrastructure in terms of balancing the larger scale stormwater and detention and management to protect from flooding. And so then we think, how do we do that beyond just the larger events, but also looking at stormwater management strategies that look at the entire district, not just on a site-by-site basis. And a lot of it is about education, because people can do things on their private yards. You talked about rainwater gardens and pollinator gardens and other low impact development. Some of those things happen at the private level as well as the public level. So how do we educate and tell people how to do that? And then how can we as a public entity kind of be leaders in that green infrastructure investment through our public space, whether it's a park, whether it's a street right of way, or other public improvements. Crestview School is a great example. One of the multiple examples of this project where they were implementing these ideas before the ink is dried on the plan. So the map here shows kind of how we distilled those strategies into the uphill strategies, the right-of-way improvements, the stuff that happens in a public realm, as well as things that get integrated into redevelopment plans and redevelopment approaches and strategies. District parks in Linnean Park, again, we focused in on Linnean Park. That was one of the major charges of the project, but we also thought broadly about the district. We see Linnean Park as that central gathering place for the neighborhood, but it's still more of a neighborhood district park. It's not necessarily a big community park. And we did a lot of engagement to figure out what are the programming elements of that. We had a lot of people participate in that. We had Crestview School kids, 6th grade kids. That was a great experience that staff led them through to give them an opportunity to say, here's how we'd like to see it. And so we tried to take all those pieces and figure out how do you fit those in there. We quickly arrived at a suggestion for the Diamond Safety Center, or the Harbach Center now, that it's a community-oriented space. And so at first we're looking, do you scrape it? Do you repurpose it? Do you give it to some other private use, or do you keep it as community center? And that was kind of a quick conclusion we came to. And that's another example where the ink's not dry yet and you're implementing a pilot study for it. We looked also at that, at your discussion earlier today about the development project, thinking of how is a development serving a neighborhood park need. And we looked at how do you make sure that we serve the entire district with walkable, accessible parks. West of 86, we have kind of a challenge there. We have a small little pocket park that doesn't serve that neighborhood great, but it's fully developed. And so how do you figure out how to create a park on the west side? We don't emphasize that as a priority project, but we still identify it as a need that we need to keep in mind. And as opportunity presents itself, or when we can get some of these other big projects off our plate, we can reorient our attention to that. Circulation is important in that respect. And so making sure we have good access, safe crossings of 86th Street, and you'll see some recommendations on that. That's one way to try to provide that better connection for parks. And then integration of the floodplain buyout area, keeping that this passive natural open space, interpretive park improvements that are resilient to flooding. And then also kind of repurposing George Lundberg Park and integrating it into that site, keeping some of the same components for the programmatic side of it. So we have a diagram that kind of shows all those components. And then this is the Linnaean Park. I assume you've had a chance to kind of peek at this. Again, this is the framework concept. We went from 10,000 feet to 5,000 feet. This is kind of that 1,000 foot to 5,000 foot range. The next steps in implementation is really dialing it in. We weren't able to fit everything in here. We tried to take prioritization of a lot of the things that we heard and said, okay, here's a program and here's how it would fit. And we show two diagrams here because we phase kind of the idea of this festival street and what the city owns on the northwest portion of the block and future redevelopment that might happen on the south side of the block. And so you see that come together as kind of two phases, and we integrate the Harbach Center into this concept. Density, we'll talk more about that, is a really important part of this because we have to figure out how to park it. And we want to create as much parking possibilities as we can, trying to hide it. So underground parking is a key part to this, as well as stormwater management, creating opportunities within the site to manage stormwater for the site itself, but also if there's possibility to manage stormwater beyond this
Actually,
area.
a question about the underground parking. That
Yes.
really came to my eye right when I saw it the first time, but how feasible is that, right? I mean, we all know that underground parking is astronomical compared to any other parking option. And to even think there's going to be underground parking there, to me, is crazy.
I would say it's feasible. I would say it depends on who, the creativity of the development team doing the project. It depends on the market at the time and how much density they can fit on the site. And it also depends on the geotechnical analysis that still has to be done. So we could learn that it's not as feasible as we think it is based on what's underground.
Let's think everything is, and I want to pinpoint this one because it's a big feature of how this might work. We're having a hard enough time finding somebody that's even interested in that park, in those lots there, right?
Yeah.
And we've loosely marketed them. We bought them years ago. Now you were going to say underground parking.
Well, I
guess I just need to know, is this just wish list and clouds and hopes, or is this a real option?
I think as we start to talk about implementation in a little more detail, what we'll learn is that's a key part of the project that we as a public are trying to achieve here.
Sure.
And so if there are incentives or if they're tax increment or other things, we have to build that in as part of the project. And so that becomes, if we really want that component, we got to bring some other resources to the table. And so that's part of the whole implementation story behind it. Now, when I say underground parking, it may be that it's just surface, it's just first level parking. It's not necessarily underground, but it's under the structure itself. So there are ways that you can integrate it in, but regardless, if we're building a lot of critical mass there, we got to figure out how we park that. And it may be, it costs more. And so we have to figure out where do we get those funding, where do we get those resources to do it? It's not going to be easy. And I'll tell you that it's not something that tomorrow you're going to find a developer that will do it. But as you make improvements and as you make public investments, the possibility for that becomes more. And at the end of the day, you have to decide, is it important for us to make that level of investment in order to get that? And so is it feasible? I think it's feasible. It may take longer to do. You may have to wait longer to get it to happen.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to dwell on this, but I do a little bit, and I love futuristic and outside the box and let's go bold and that type of thing. But what I'm not willing to do is say, I'm going to hold this up for the pie in the sky for somebody that might take this deal in 20 years. And so therefore this area needs to wait, or this needs to stop, or, you know, when will it come? And so I caution as we walk through this that we need actionable items that aren't purely wish list items. I mean, if I had my wish, I'd bulldoze 2 blocks around that thing and we'd start building back up. And we'd have these cool apartments with all the amenities and the fireplaces and the, you know, lounge rooms and the arcade room. I could go on if we could build a wish list. This neighborhood's got to have something actionable in the next 5 years.
But Mike, I guess my question, I hear what you're saying, but is the rest of this concept, like with Lannan Park, contingent upon that? And if it's not, then we can do some actionable items. And then that maybe comes later. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I'm asking that.
Yeah.
And I
It
think
wouldn't
in
seem
this-
to me that it is contingent upon that.
It's
so.
not. And I think you'll see in this plan, there's really big ideas. Underground parking's a big ideas. And then there's more actual smaller ideas too. So it's really a mixture of things right there.
Well, and I think, I mean, building off that, it sounds like, you know, what Ted and Eric were just saying, you know, if we implement that Lannan Park change and we see an influx of people, maybe that helps us reprioritize. Maybe we do spend some more money on that surface level parking because that's now, you know, it's got 1,000 people coming in every day. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, and where I caution that is we have I'll make up the number, we have 1,000 people coming today. Do we need to change who the 1,000 are to then make these changes demographically and financially to make that happen?
I mean,
or do we okay with this being the highest use? Am I wrong by using this? It's the highest used park in our city by far on a weekly basis, year round, right?
Let's let Amanda interject here.
Yeah, I just had a couple comments about the parking. It's not just the underground or surface with the kind of the building wrapped around it. If you look at the diagram here, we're showing on-street parking. That's not really something overly available in a lot of this neighborhood. In front of the Harbach Center, there's kind of anywhere you see the P in the circle would be parking. There's also ideas about how we might be able to partner with the apartments owned next door, Glacier Properties, to reorient some of those accesses and maybe eke out some more parking that while people are not home, that could be a public-private kind of agreement there. And then also like the Festival Street would provide parking. So the idea of getting more activated and mixed uses available in the area that would allow, you know, the people that might live in some of the mixed use kind of areas will be not home when some of the shops are open, and trying to integrate some of that. So it's not going to be one parking garage solves parking in the neighborhood. It's going to have to be kind of picking away at that in a bunch of different ways and trying those things out.
All right, we can come back to it. Let me keep moving and we'll come back to that topic. So I'm going to skip over the floodplain buyout, but we talked a little bit about the idea of integrating George Lundberg Park and taking more of a passive approach to the floodplain area. Circulation became a very important topic, and we're trying to figure out how do you enhance or how do you improve the pedestrian and bicycle environment within the district itself. And so we have a number of different recommendations. One of the big things that we played with different concepts and ideas was trying to create this north-south spine connecting Hickman down to the Greenway, the Greenbelt corridor. And the idea that 86th Street today is really not a pedestrian-oriented street. The long-term vision makes it better. It's got a lot of lifespan left in the road itself. There's sidewalks there, but if we could create more of a pedestrian and bicycle spine off of that, We had one concept that looked between 82nd and 86th. There's not always public right of way there, so it's much more difficult. And to your point, Councilor McCoy, about the actionable stuff, that was one that was great idea, really hard to do because it's hard to get that right away for it. 82nd Street, much more of that is there. And the portion of it that's not public right of way, we've got a stormwater easement. So we really have the ability to create that full connection from Hickman all the way to the Greenbelt more easily. So we explore a number of those different connectivity strategies, and those recommendations are outlined from a network standpoint. We also talk a lot about more simple improvements that are crosswalk enhancements, whether it's simply painting or emphasizing via signage, or it's more capital investment where you're literally reconfiguring an intersection when you would do street reconstruction projects. We identify a number of locations where those crosswalk enhancements would help with safety features. And a lot of those were fed to us through the engagement process. So that's not us just saying, here's some random ones. It's really saying, where are the priority ones that the people say, we need some enhancements here. There are a lot of pedestrian destinations, whether it's school, whether it's the Harbach Center, Linehan Park, Swanson Memorial Park, and those destinations create a lot of pedestrian movements. We want to make those safer if we can. Wayfinding and trailheads to connecting to the Greenbelt were also important. We've been talking between this draft and now about kind of prioritizing or distinguishing them different between a major trailhead and a neighborhood oriented trailhead, distinguishing parking for one versus not necessarily parking, but more wayfinding and signage. And so we may make some tweaks between now and the approval process, but this shows some of the connections to the Greenbelt and some of the locations where we would have a more trailhead focus. Moving from circulation then into redevelopment. And again,
before we do that, can I jump in?
Yes.
McCoy here.
Yes.
So on the circulation, I think it's incredibly important, and I love the concept. And you know, I know in the feedback we got from residents and what have you, whatever it was, 69% wanted better circulation, et cetera. But everybody wants that better trail and better circulation when it's in someone else's yard.
Correct.
Right? It better not impact my yard.
Yes.
And so, and we see it all the time. And I mean, even in the short time you've been on, you've seen it, right? So how do we solve that challenge with this? I'm just skeptical that we can.
So the introductory comments I made about holding to the vision and keeping the long-term in mind is my subtle way of saying, you guys have the hard job. You have to make the hard decisions. What's better for the broader community in the neighborhood versus the people that it's going to be in their front yards. We've picked these locations because of their connectivity. You look at some of the streets, they're through streets, they connect certain places or trails. And so there's a reason for us saying these are the locations where they're going to be, they should be there. Yes, people are not going to be excited if it's in their front yard. So we have to work through the detailed design level to try to mitigate that as much as we can. But at the end of the day, you know, we may have a plan where 70% of the people really like it, 30% don't, and that's where the hard decisions come into play.
And those 30% are very vocal.
Very vocal,
and
absolutely. I do day-to-day planning services a lot, like what Amanda does, and believe me, I know the difficulty of there. And so to the extent that you can hold up a comprehensive plan, policy, and goals, hold this plan up. As we went through this process, we know you may not like this, but this is what's the best. This is the best solution for the city. What can we do then through the detailed design aspect to mitigate your concern? So it's not completely ignoring them, but it's trying to figure out at that detailed design level, how do we try to soften it? So like I said, these are some hard decisions that you have to make as a council.
Brad, as we went through this process, we talked initially on the circulation about a trail that hugged the Greenbelt right there through the backyards, and that vocal minority, it became all about that. So
Right.
that is no longer in this plan right there. So,
well, and there was a place where it went through along the creek that wasn't as critical of a connection, and we said we could give that one up. But yes, we had those discussions too, just so you know, with a number of those residents, probably a half dozen or more, concerned about three things: that trail connection, density, And then some of the housing stuff we talked about where you've got some really large lots, you know, over an acre lot within an urban developed sewer infrastructure area. There's possibilities for those lots to come together and do a subdivision and create more creative housing possibilities. Getting to the point you made, there's an opportunity where they could get detached single family homes. Somebody at some point in time is going to take that leap. It may take many years. It may take someone who's doesn't care about being real friends with the neighbors, or it may take a group of neighbors coming together and doing it. But at some point in time, somebody will bring that forward. What we can do as a community is create the regulatory framework to enable it to happen. And that'll be a hard thing for you to decide to do too. But you're not saying we're going to do it, but you're going to change your zoning code to enable it to happen. And so some of the strategies we have in the housing chapter and in the redevelopment chapter talk about zoning modifications. And when we talked with the community advisory committee about prioritization, those zoning modifications were kind of at the bottom of their priority list. But the reality is those are at the heart and core of a lot of the implementation strategies that we can do, where we don't have to invest a lot of money in doing it, but we can create the avenue for the private sector to do it. The parking strategy and parking underground. We have a cap on density. We have a cap on building height. What if we got rid of those caps and let the market come forth and do it? Again, it might not be there today, but if they can, and if the market presents itself, then it can happen. And a lot of that is what helps fund that lower level. Same with mixed use buildings. We talk about retail at ground level. In most places, that doesn't work very well. When it does work, the residential subsidizes the ground level retail because they want the independent mom and pop kind of stores, the restaurants, the creative places that can't afford to pay the same rent as those new building space do. So you have to figure out how do you equalize that in order to get those uses in there.
I agree with you. I'd love to see that there, right on 86th Street. It was just, I think
it's not
even
easy.
Before my days on this council, we've gone through renditions of what 86 is going to look like 20 times, and you can see pieces of it as you drive up 86. This must have been the 80s, and this was late 80s, and this was 90s, and they didn't. But if you drive down, if any of you have been to Valley Junction lately, it's impressive what they're doing down there. I mean, you can see it starting to come together, what you're talking about, right? So it does give me hope.
Do you want to interject there? As a Valley Junction resident who is very excited about those changes in the neighborhood.
You're not a Clive.
I'm not a Clive resident, unfortunately. There is a lot of vocal opposition from our business owners in that neighborhood and some of the homeowners. I live 2 blocks north of there. I love it. I love seeing the multi-story, the mixed use, the apartments. Huge fan. But it's very vocal at those meetings, and it is hard to be the West Des Moines city staff and elected officials right now. I agree, it's awesome, and that's what I want to see here, but it is going to be hard.
The other side of that story, and I don't know if you know, I don't know the history of it very well, but I know a little bit because we had seen RFPs, and I think we even chased one 15 or 16 years ago. 15 and 16 years ago.
Right.
So the planning that we're talking about happens over a long period of time. 2004, you did the original vision for the 86th Street corridor, not the whole neighborhood, but the 86th Street corridor. And a lot of what was in there was reinforced through our public engagement process. Did it happen? No. Will what we show in this plan happen? Maybe not. Could it? Yeah. It depends on how much energy and effort and how much commitment we put to that vision. Are we willing to lose our jobs over a vote? That's a hard thing for you as council members to do, but I have a few colleagues above me, older than me, that have always used that line, and I've never used it till now. But that's a challenge. You as council members have to be willing to say, this is an important vision to stick to, and I'm willing to put my head on a pedestal for it. So I think those things are important considerations and examples like what you pointed out with Valley Junction. There are lessons to be learned from that. How did you do it? What were the trials and tribulations that you experienced for it? How long did it take to happen? Where did you find the developer? Those kinds of dialogues we always encourage you to have those conversations with your communities or other communities where there's examples of those kinds of projects. And quite honestly, the parking underground, there are communities where they thought it would never happen and they got it to work. It took a partnership. And so get out there and figure it out, learn how to do it. And I know we can point you to a number of examples and get into the weeds on it and start talking about the financial mechanisms to be able to make it happen. Let's see here. So 86 3/4. So we talk about the redevelopment aspect of it, focusing on as a first project, really focusing on figuring out what happens with that parcel that the city owns today. And we know that this, like you mentioned, you brought up, this may not happen right away. There are interim uses we can use that site for while we're building the case for it, while we're doing the improvements to Lynn and Park, and while momentum's building and you're trying to figure out how do we get it to happen. So use the site for other purposes. And we talk about pop-up events. That's a big thing right now for commercial practices to be able to come up, set establishment and pop up and experience. And who knows, maybe those become bricks and mortar buildings and those become some of the tenants you figure out to locate in some of the new development. There are many other areas in the city or in the district where we've talked about redevelopment. And I'm not going to emphasize those too much, but if we have questions about those, we can get back to them. The only one I'll talk about is this, the University Park area, where we've got a number of big box retail stores that are all vacant. You know, what happens to those next? There could be an interim use that wants to come in there that prolongs its life, that doesn't do the neighborhood any benefit, but generates dollars for the property owner. How do we make sure that what we put in place prevents the immediate return from letting us enable a bigger vision? And so part of that zoning strategy is making sure there's some economic vitality to it, but not keeping that long-term, again, in view. Housing opportunities, again, we're largely programmatic. One of the things that we talk about is this housing resource kit. It's bringing all the different components together, inspiring people that, you know, with plan ideas or plan sets, connecting people with do-it-yourself opportunities. You could use the Harbach Center as a component of that to create a place where all the different entities within the Des Moines region that provide housing services can have a center there that becomes that resource. And then there's the redevelopment potential and redevelopment opportunities. And then there's the zoning side of it, where we can look at our zoning codes and figure out how to enable more housing product types and diversity within these districts. We identified the yellow areas as kind of these preserve areas where there's a pretty strong housing stock there. I kind of had my battles with some of the folks on the far eastern side where they got those big lots, and that was part of our discussion at the open house. A very respectful, your points at the beginning of the council meeting, they were very respectful discussions. And at the end of the discussions, people understand it. They said, you know, we said in our engagement, we didn't want density, but you keep coming back with more density. The reason we talk about density and we focus it more in the places where it's really going to help with the vitality and energy is it gives us those things that we're trying to achieve that are not necessarily what the market's going to do. Parking hidden, creative stormwater approaches, more open space, and by granting more density, we help try to get the market to be able to do it. And so there's a lot of reason for that. Plus, it creates the energy and the walkability because if you're more people there, more businesses can be there, more opportunities to walk to support them versus driving into destination. So that housing opportunities diagram kind of encompasses all of those different pieces. Lastly, we've broken these down into key implementation projects. And we've said we've got a set of catalyst projects that are the bigger moves that really have the ability to spawn other things around them. And then we have a series of springboard projects. And I'm going to stop there and not get into that too much. But then again, just emphasize a few things that, again, you're making a commitment through this plan when you adopt it to invest in the resources, both the financial side of it as well as your staffing resources. You're making that commitment to the vision and the big ideas and the advocacy component to it, advocating for the plan. And I think one of the strategies that we do lay out in here is this idea of a team, that you create a team that helps you have sort of this constant engagement process, and also a team that is focused on the district here. And that team is probably led by a staff person and then supported by people that are in the neighborhood, in the community, that bring different resources to the table. Well, that's often a hard thing to do, but I think that's an important aspect to it. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there are other questions or places within the plan you want to focus discussion on their topics.
Questions on this end?
I
Okay.
don't want to be a weaver.
You never could be. trust me. So the original 86th Street plan, John was the only one here at that time, but I know I've heard, I didn't mean that as a pejorative. But I've heard both John and Scott and others say that what really stalled that plan and the reason why it didn't really come to fruition was because, obviously it was a multi-year plan, but we hit the recession that came about in 07, 08. And that really kind of stalled all the forward momentum of that. I have some real concerns about where things are going currently with our housing market and with the economy. What type of inherent risk do you see? Obviously, you don't have a crystal ball, but how does that impact this if we hit another recession here in the next 1 to 2 years?
So Brent Wittenberg is with Marquette Advisors. He was our real estate person that was on our team. And when we started this project, I think the day we signed the contract was the day that, I don't know if it was our governor or the federal government said, we're in a pandemic. And that threw everything on its head. We were already experiencing this kind of weird bubble of creative retail and commercial uses that was really about placemaking. It's about the experience more than it was about going to buy a gadget here and there. It's about the experience. We've been working with a number of different market real estate people, and we had started creating these presentations that were about trends. And one of the big messages that came out of all of them was about adaptability. And when the market changes, how are you able to adapt? When we deal with zoning, we talk a lot about form over use. The form and the character of the buildings, more so than the use. And a lot of times we'll talk about the design of the space as well. So if we talk about our idea for Linnaean Park block is to create an active use on the street level. Well, it may be that the design of it fosters a commercial space, but today it's a live work, artist studio or something that promotes living because that's what the market would support. We have to be able to adapt to those changes. And so to that extent, the plan might have to change and might have to adapt if some big change in market demand or financing happens. So then we go back to the goals, those high level principles. And I think in one of the memorandums from Amanda, she talks about staying true to the bigger vision. So the footprint might change, the individual site design might change. How do we then tie back what that proposal is to those vision or to those goals elements? And do they still further those? And we have to be willing to have those discussions and be willing to change. And that's just the nature of planning at this level. And that's the nature of the business we're in. I mean, we can't predict a lot of these things. So the market people tell us malleability. You got to be malleable. You got to be able to take that change in, discuss it, and be able to move it forward with still keeping that long-term vision in mind. And it might be more of a temporary use strategies as well. It's a tough question.
Can I just add a little bit of that as well and bring it more specifically to our home? Part of the original 86th Street stuff, it was a little bit of a build it and hope they will come. Right. And we built some pretty big things, pretty expensive, intricate, complex to get done. And it took a long time to do. I think what you're going to see when we bring back some of the implementation, there's still going to be some big ideas, some expensive things at Linnaean Park, for example, Harbach improvements. There's going to be some big moves. But I think what you're also going to see is a very intentional approach to doing a lot of little things. Get these things out the door, start making changes happen today. It may not be perfect, but we have to start getting some things going. We have to create some energy. We have to focus on those things that I would call are generally recession proof. And some of those are going to be connectivity, getting people to a park, getting them a park so they can go and play because maybe they can't afford to do whatever it is. So I do think that there are going to be big options. There are going to be a whole lot of little options. And if we stay true to the vision, and again, we might have to pivot or ebb and flow which one of them gets the priority, but I do think we can find a path that can manage the ups and the downs that we're undoubtedly going to have to deal with. Because this, again, I said it in 2002 when we started this, that 86th Street plan was going to be at best accomplished in 20 years. Well, we didn't even come close to that. The things that we're talking about here, if the pretty picture is the ideal, again, if we get a quarter of the way in 20 years, we'd probably be doing something pretty good. So we're probably going to go through a couple ebbs and flows in terms of the economy. But if we stay true to the core principles, there's really hard decisions you're going to have to make that are going to create the environment for that future will pay dividends. You just have to trust the process. You have to trust staff when we bring you these things, which again, I know nobody votes for us, but we will bring you the things that are going to help move this part of the community forward over the long term.
I'd vote for you, Doug.
And planning's not a one and done thing, I mean, either. So in that respect, you're continually planning. It's, you know, we adopt this or we accept it and file it, however you take it on. It's not done. You're implementing, and that's more planning. And you're going through the process. And as you experience something, you may get a project and it may not work. I mean, it may not be what we expected, and you have to figure out how you adapt and how do you pivot. And so I think that message is one that we need to keep on the forefront, and we do what we can to keep it moving and keep planning.
Eric?
Brad, we've been meeting for 2 years with this, and Amanda, this District 1, so it's you know, on Zoom, so it's good to visit on this. I think one of the key things that you kind of alluded to is that this is a living, breathing document, and it's going to change as the economy changes, Ted, as the needs of the city change. But one of the key things that I found is that a lot of this is already going on. As we look at the flood prone buyouts, we can do some things in conjunction with that. Incentivization, Shrikant, I thought that was some good points that you made right there. As we look at the revitalization of Lannan and the Hardback Center, a lot of these things are already going on. And so, Doug, I agree. It's getting these little wins and building up that momentum, and people see that and they get on the bandwagon right there, especially with the circulation aspect and people seeing this and the rejuvenation of Hardback and rejuvenation of Lannan. These are good things, and a lot of them have already going, but just continue with some of these wins.
Other questions or comments?
I just have a comment that I'm excited to have this plan to work from as we're about to implement our Economic Vitality Committee, because that group will be charged with looking at the city as a whole. And this gives us a great basis for really thinking about this area. And we all know that we want to make some investments here. But I've been concerned as we've purchased property in the area and that kind of thing, which I've supported along the way, that we've tended to put our eggs in one basket. And I'm really looking forward to having a broad thought process about what incentive programs we should have to try to drive some redevelopment or development as needed in various parts of opportunity pockets throughout the city. So I think this will give us a really good basis for showing that we intend to focus on this area, but that'll be balanced over the next year as we look at the city's overall economic development plan, which needs to be revised. That group can help us with that, and there will be more conversation to come. So I'm really excited about it. Good job.
Yeah, Councilmember Jenkins, we, to that effect, when we when we were talking with the market group on this project and we were brainstorming things that we could do here, we have a bunch of these strategies listed on pages, I think 80, starts on 81. And we call them district-wide strategies, and we're putting them together with this district in mind. But quite honestly, these things could be citywide. And they're talking about trends. So some of them are trendy today and they may not be trendy tomorrow. But they're also kind of strategies that quite honestly could go into neighborhood nodes or other corridors. So those could be helpful with that as well.
Thank you, Brad.
Okay.
Amanda, when will we see this again?
So at this point, we anticipate at the second June meeting, I think that's June 23rd, that we'll be back with some of that implementation discussion for you all.
That'll be fun.
Looking forward to it.
All right, thank you very much.
Good work.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah, let me just say that's really outstanding work. It really was. I mean, it was a lot to read and get and digest, but it was, I mean, kudos to everyone that worked on this. It was some great work.
Very good. Moving on to the next item on our agenda. Do we have any correspondence, Matthew?
No, Your Honor, we do not.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the reports. We'll start on this end. Michael.
I have nothing.
Very good. Susan.
I'd just like to say we had a very good visit in Washington, DC. Enjoyed spending the time with the council and staff, and thought we had some really meaningful conversations that we'll continue to build on. You know, we heard tonight conversation about federal funding, and that was definitely a focus there. So.
Very good. Thank you, Susan. A few things to report here. One, save the date for Wednesday, October 12th. We will be hosting, I say we, the Ray Center at Drake, the Iowa League of Cities and National League of Cities will be hosting a Civility in Government National Summit. We've been working on this many, many months, and we're actually going to pull it off. It'll be a virtual one this time out, and then hopefully actually in person thereafter, but that's Wednesday, October 12th. You'll be hearing more about that as the date approaches. So just wanted to mention that. Secondly, I don't know if you got the notice from the Polk County Housing Trust Fund about the Here We Grow Housing Opportunity Tour on June 17. Did everybody get that?
They were gonna, in my weekly update tomorrow, so
Okay,
they will get it.
I will not say anything further on that, other than I know they've been
I
interested.
know I received it, so I was gonna share it with the council.
Very good. Perfect. Keystone on 8th in West Des Moines, I think has been mentioned as something we might look at as something to be helpful for us. So just wanted to, again, kudos to Jeff May for being one of the best public works directors in the country. He got that award on Thursday, and that was quite an accomplishment. Final thing I wanted to mention is that several of the Metro mayors were invited to a bus rodeo, or rodeo, I suppose, depending on your pronunciation. McCoy, I don't know if you put them up to this, but so I had the opportunity to drive a Metro bus through a course, an obstacle course.
Wow.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
There's a nice video of it too.
Oh, they posted.
There's
the
a video on social media on the DART Facebook page.
Okay.
I could bring it up if you want me to.
Not at this moment.
Send that out in your weekly report.
I will. I'll add it. I'll add it.
Want to show
I want to see that.
So my goal, I mean, at the end of the course, you had to speed up and then stop on a dime, and then about 10 feet away was a transformer. And so my goal was not to destroy or damage a $500,000 piece of equipment or anything else. And I was successful in that endeavor. I did not flatten any cones as I was going through. But like everyone else, well, we had to go through barrels where you had a 3-inch clearance on each side. Not so good. Those barrels were flying off. So nevertheless, I felt, you know, I didn't damage anything, and that was my goal. However, because of my caution, I was awarded, they didn't have winners and losers. They gave out certificates. something like that. The award I received was, I think a turtle passed you. Based on my cautious and safe activity. So with that, Eric, I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, a couple quick things here. Attended Flooring America's 20th anniversary with the Chambers. Really nice event, Christy. I thought well done and really appreciate Flooring America being a 20-year Clive business. Also, Councilman McCoy, you'd asked about the budget for Catch Des Moines. It is $6.37 million. And if anyone likes to, I've got the budget right here. I'm glad we shared that if anyone would like to look at that, or I can send out the link to you. That's all, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right, so MPO, if you all recall, Gunnar Olson came in a number of months back, briefing us on the Economic Development District, forming of that. So that is now up and running. They hired a full-time planner from Marshalltown. His name's Caleb Knutson. And so it's actually called MIPA, Mid-Iowa Planning Alliance. So if you hear of MIPA, that's that Economic Development District. It includes 51 different jurisdictions, municipalities, counties, what have you. The most recent one that was added was Ames. So it's quite broad. Their first board meeting is this week sometime. So that group is now up and running and active. So
That's when that meeting was this morning.
oh, was it? Okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
Of the membership, one of the other interesting stats was even though they aren't capturing all of the potential members, they represent over 90% of the population in the counties that are covered.
Yeah, so that could be a real economic development opportunity for the whole region. So it should be good.
Thanks, Ted.
Just a brief item. I wanted to concur with Councilmember Judkins' comments on the trip to DC. So it was an experience. But I actually got the chance to talk with Congresswoman Axney again day before yesterday. And it was, I just kind of reiterated what we had talked to her in DC about, wanted to get help from her office funding some of our projects. And she was very open to that, very supportive of that, as she was, during our meeting in DC as well. That's all.
Thank you. Pete?
We have over 90 people who have completed applications for our soil quality restoration cost share program. We need probably a larger number than that to fill out the full 100 that we'd like to accomplish this fall. So if you haven't filled out the application, I would encourage you to do so. Thank you to our friends at Polk County and friends also at Metro Waste and other partners who've helped us spread the word about this. Expect that when we get to the first June meeting, we will be setting a hearing for awarding bids in the first part of July. Between now and when we get to that point, we will be going out and getting a measurement of all the total square footage we think we're going to be treating. And then we'll be able to use that in our bid documents that we prepare so that we can get a very competitive price per square foot for application from any of these companies that are interested in participating. So we're excited. I think we're going to hit some really good marks.
Your compost started cooking last week.
Excellent. Excellent.
How long does it take to cook?
About 3 months.
Oh, it'll be perfect timing.
14 more Clark Street trees were planted already this week, with 14 more going on later in June. Unfortunately, due to weather and hangups with our contractor, we weren't able to get sod down last week. We still have a window. It's going to take some watering, but next week looks like we'll have the weather conditions we need to get out there and get that sod done. I drove the corridor right before this meeting, and we've got some places that are looking rough. So we want to make sure we acknowledge that when we're working with the property owners. They've continued to be very, very patient. I haven't heard a big influx this week of folks who are frustrated. I think they have a clear understanding now of what our intention is going to be, is to get that area restored, stabilized, and then ultimately get those plants in the cells as well. We'll keep you updated as we keep making progress. Went to the MIPA board meeting this morning as well. The last point I'd make is, I know it's something on the front of mind for everybody, but there were a lot of communications that have been going out from the school districts in the wake of what happened in Texas this week. And I'm confident that given the high number of families that we have in Clive, this is on the mind of a lot of your constituents. And just speaking very personally, having the conversation with my two boys about what it means to go to school right now is something I won't soon forget. But that's nothing compared to, I'm sure, the way that those families in that community feels in Texas right now, not to mention in Buffalo, New York. So we'll continue to watch carefully as the community is generating ways to recognize that trauma and to focus on healing and focusing on making sure as a community we wrap our arms around the children that are our special protection.
Thank you, Pete. Council, anything? Matt?
Yeah, just a few items, Your Honor. Earlier this week, as you saw in the news, the legislature did adjourn for this session. Well, it took like kind of a month gap in there to get to that point. We're evaluating, again, of course, there's a whole lot of bills that are passed in a short amount of time period. Not aware of any immediate concerns from a local government standpoint. There was something in the standings bill related to home occupation, home-based businesses that we want to take a look at once we see the final language, just to see if it impacts at all the ordinances that you all passed about 6-7 years ago related to home-based businesses. As you'll see at your next council meeting, there was a piece of legislation related to fireworks that was passed that will require a change in our zoning ordinance to conform with state law. It now requires, does not allow a city to limit sale of class 1, class 2 fireworks. We currently limit it to just industrial zoning in our community, and now prevents that limitation in commercial properties. So it will force you all to expand that to commercial, industrial, all commercial property as well as industrial to conform with state law. As was shared when that bill was passed, of course, the concern that we had from the fire and almost massive explosion in our community last year from the container and the sale location along Hickman. So that will be coming before you at the next council meeting. Also wanted to mention this weekend, Aquatic Center is opening. Austin Tasler, our aquatics coordinator, as Kristen referred to earlier, has done a great job of, we are fully staffed. We're one of the few aquatic centers that is fully staffed. You'll find that there's some other communities in the metro that aren't going to be able to open up certain facilities because they're not staffed. So credit to that team, Richard's team, Kristen, Roxanne, Austin. It's a big effort, especially in these times to get that many kids all recruited, ready to go, trained, open up that aquatic center for what looks like to be a very good weather weekend for the opening aquatic center. As you recall, last year, Memorial Day, it was like 50 degrees. So we'll take the 80s and 90s and have it open for the weekend, closed during the week, and then open for the full season that first weekend in June when after school is out. So excited about that. Also Food Truck Friday tomorrow night, and also a number of activities at the Harbach Center over the weekend. So recreation, Parks and Recreation in full swing here this weekend. One thing I wanted to mention too is, and I'll be sharing this in my weekly update, and something that I want you all to take a look at and react to is we've had a proposal submitted to us by the Horizon Center owners related to some things that they're thinking about of how they can activate their space even further into 2023. Want to get your kind of reactions to it. So I'll be sharing that with you all. Would love some direct feedback on that. Just some opportunities, again, as we've talked about that partnership of finding ways to activate that space, to Councilmember Judkins' point, in certain areas of the community of long-term visioning and master planning of how we can activate spaces. What can we do in the interim with some of these property owners that are actively looking at ways to utilize their property for business activity. That Horizon Center area is one of those. And so there's some ideas that we'll want to show you and kind of get initial reaction to before the staff moves any further with it. So I'll be sharing that with you tomorrow. So just wanted to draw your attention to that. And other than unless there's any questions, that's all I have, Your Honor.
Did you want to mention flying foul at all?
I'd be happy to. Based on the reactions from you all, not anticipating presenting any changes to you all in terms of what the city may do from a code standpoint. We are going to defer to the owners or the HOA board to continue to work with the concerned resident related to managing geese around the Country Club Lake property. Unless I hear different, the responses I've received indicate that there isn't a desire to do anything at this time from the city level. So we'll continue to enforce the ordinances that we have in place. And I know Councilmember Judkins shared that the CCOA board is looking at maybe bringing in a consultant or doing some additional work on this effort. And so we feel that's the appropriate venue at this time, and won't be doing anything further. And unless there's any other desire from the council, the mayor and I will follow up with the concerned residents to indicate that the city doesn't intend to do anything at this time.
Very good. Thank you, Matthew.
Last thing, Harbach is now closed, right?
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Oh, the first phase, this
So
was
everybody
they are mobilized this week for phase 1 and we are underway. So one thing you'll notice is a lot of construction activity in the community, and Tuesday it goes into full effect with the closure of 86th Street.
Yeah.
So staff's done a great job, Pete, sending, and we'll have a mention of this too tomorrow, is press releases have gone out, information's online. The message boards have been out all week. The businesses have all been contacted. Staff has done everything preemptively that we could think of. And so we are ready and hoping that we have good weather and can get it done quickly.
That's gonna make it tricky though, right? With 86 being closed and now Harbach closed. It is gonna pile cars up at every side street and everything.
Well, the new detour route down
Primrose.
89th Street.
That's been,
Leave you at that.
it's amazing. There was mafia blocks put in there, with Jersey barriers and from overnight. I don't know where they came from.
So we have
It's a
a lot of
cul-de-sac
activity,
now.
activity happening on a one thing I do want to mention, and Jeff and I were talking about this week, is the contractor, and I'm probably knock on wood as I say this, but the contractor that's doing the water main replacement in the Rio Valley neighborhood is really moving and has done a great job of they're ahead of schedule, which again is rare to say right now with any contractor. That was the Crow River group who came out of market into this area for that, and really done some really good work there. They've already finished the water main portion and now we're doing the patching and driveway replacement. So again, a great example of in a neighborhood that's seeing a lot of activity with the second phase of Clark Street happening and that happening in another part of the neighborhood. Great to see a contractor that's moving fast and doing good work. So would welcome them on future projects if we have the opportunity. So great to see that out of that Crow River team.
Very good. Questions for Matthew. Could we get periodic updates on MetroNet on their progress?
Yep. We'll get you an update on that.
We've actually got our next meeting scheduled, we have been meeting with them monthly to keep track with them, but Jared's touching base with them almost on, I think, on a daily basis as they go through the normal permitting process. And he continues to be extremely vigilant about making sure that they don't shirk any of their restoration requirements.
Very good. I think I get a postcard from them every other day. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we'll adjourn at 8:32.